We often treat anxiety like a flaw, like something broken inside of us that needs to be fixed. But what if the truth is something much more empowering? What if anxiety isn't a flaw at all, but a signal, a powerful, intelligent, misunderstood signal from a part of your brain that's trying to protect you, even when it gets it wrong? And that misunderstanding, that's where the suffering begins. The brain's job is survival, not happiness. It doesn't care about your peace, your confidence, your growth. It cares about one thing, keeping you safe. And so it builds this intricate system of alarms. Most of them get installed without your awareness. From childhood, from fear, from trauma, from moments when you were overwhelmed and had no idea how to process what you were feeling. And in those moments, your brain formed connections. It learned, this is dangerous, this hurts, don't let this happen again. That's why sometimes your anxiety doesn't make logical sense. You're not in danger, nothing is really wrong, and yet your body is acting like you're under threat. Because anxiety isn't about what's happening right now, it's about what your brain believes might happen. It's about the story your nervous system has been trained to tell. And if you've never questioned that story, you'll believe it's truth. But it's not truth. It's memory, it's pattern, it's your brain playing reruns of fear, trying to save you from something that may not even be real anymore. That's what makes anxiety feel so heavy. It hijacks your thoughts, it clouds your clarity, and it convinces you that you're not capable, not safe, not ready. And here's the real trap. The more we believe anxiety is a flaw, the more we judge ourselves for having it. We start to build shame on top of fear. We isolate, we overthink, we mask it by staying busy, by pleasing people, by staying quiet, by pretending everything is okay. But underneath all of that is the same alarm going off. It's saying, I'm scared, I don't know how to feel this, I don't know if I'll be okay. And you know what? That's valid. That fear comes from somewhere. It has roots. You learn to feel that way for a reason. But that doesn't mean it's your destiny. You can unlearn what your brain has falsely labeled as danger. You can retrain the alarm system. But it starts by seeing it clearly. When anxiety shows up, your first instinct might be to push it away, to numb it, to fight it. But what if you paused instead? What if you just said, okay, what are you trying to tell me? That single question can change everything, because now you're not judging yourself. You're getting curious. You're shifting from reaction to awareness. And awareness is always the first step toward power. See, the moment you stop believing that anxiety is who you are and start seeing it as a pattern your brain has practiced, you create distance. That space between stimulus and response is where your power lives. That's where you remember, I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my fear. I'm the one who notices them. I'm the one who chooses what happens next. And that matters because anxiety thrives in urgency. It wants you to act fast, panic now, worry now, solve everything immediately. But healing happens in the slow, intentional moments. It happens when you take a breath and don't respond to the fear. When you witness it and remind yourself this is just a signal, it's not the truth. That's when the rewiring begins. The truth is, your brain is incredibly adaptive. It's not fixed. It's plastic. It reshapes based on what you repeatedly do, feel, and believe. So if you've spent years in fear, it makes sense that anxiety feels automatic. But if you start showing your brain that peace is possible, that safety is real, that you don't need to predict every outcome to be okay, that's when new neural pathways begin to form. That's when calm becomes your new baseline. But don't expect it to be instant. This isn't a quick fix. It's a process of reintroducing yourself to a part of you that's been living in hypervigilance. It's the process of whispering back to your fear, I hear you, but we're safe now. We don't need to live there anymore. And the more you do that, the more your brain starts to trust you. That's the beginning of real power. Not pretending you're not afraid, but realizing you can walk with fear and still move forward. So if you've been waking up anxious, stuck in your head, overwhelmed before the day even begins, I want you to know it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're broken. It's because your brain has practiced fear more than it's practiced safety. That can change. You can change it. But first, you have to stop believing the lie that anxiety is your identity. It's just your brain trying to help you the only way it knows how, and now it's time to teach it something new. If you want to break free from the anxiety that's been running your mornings and maybe your life, you have to understand something that sounds simple, but most people overlook it. Your thoughts are not facts. Let me say that again, and I want you to really hear it. Your thoughts are not facts. They are stories, often outdated, often inherited, and often completely detached from what's actually happening around you. Your mind has been rehearsing fear, rehearsing catastrophe, rehearsing worst-case scenarios for years, maybe even decades. So of course it feels automatic, of course it feels real, but that doesn't mean it's true. Just because your brain wakes up and immediately starts scanning for what could go wrong, just because your heart races before your feet even touch the floor, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means your brain has memorized that routine. And the good news is it can learn a new one. See, anxiety feeds off of assumption. It feeds off of repetition. And the most dangerous thing we repeat is unconscious thinking. You wake up and without realizing it, your brain replays the same script it played yesterday. What if today's the day I mess up? What if I can't handle it? What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not enough? And you don't question it because it sounds like your voice. But it's not your voice. It's your conditioning. That inner dialogue, that's programming. From your past, from what you were told, from how you were raised, from what you experienced, from what your nervous system absorbed and held on to. It doesn't just live in your head, it lives in your body, which is why anxiety feels physical. You don't just think fear, you feel it, you sweat, your chest tightens, your stomach flips. And those sensations reinforce the fear because your brain interprets physical response as confirmation. See, we were right to be scared. But here's where it shifts. When you learn how to catch that thought early, before it spirals, you change the direction of your whole day. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to begin practicing mental awareness right when you wake up. Because those first 5 minutes of your morning are where anxiety loves to sneak in. When your brain is still in a transitional state, when you're between sleep and full consciousness, that's when it's most vulnerable to suggestion. If you start your day in fear, you carry that fear into everything. But if you can interrupt it early, even with something as simple as asking, is this thought true? You immediately slow the momentum. It's not about fighting anxiety, it's about witnessing it, getting curious about it, learning how to notice the first thought that enters your mind when you open your eyes, and then gently, compassionately questioning it. Maybe it says, I don't think I can handle today. Instead of spiraling into stress, what if you responded with, that's just a thought, not a truth? That one sentence can begin to break a lifelong pattern. Because the truth is, most anxious thoughts are predictions. They're guesses about a future that hasn't happened yet. They're attempts at control, rooted in the belief that if you can prepare for the worst, maybe you won't be hurt. But you weren't born thinking this way. This was learned. And if it was learned, it can be unlearned. This is why it's so important to stop believing every voice in your head. Start observing it. Start separating yourself from it. Because when you do that, you realize something massive. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And that awareness is powerful. It's what allows you to choose something different, to speak a new thought into your morning, to anchor into peace before fear takes the wheel. Even saying something like, today I choose to move slowly, or I don't need to control everything to be safe, can begin to settle your nervous system. The words you speak shape the chemicals your brain releases. They shape your focus, your energy, your perception of reality. So don't underestimate the power of one intentional thought to change your emotional state. Because here's the deal, your mind can be your enemy or your greatest ally, and it becomes whatever you train it to be. If you rehearse fear, you'll live in fear. If you rehearse presence, you'll begin to feel peace. It takes practice, yes, but it doesn't take perfection. You don't need to get it right every time. You just need to catch it once. One morning, one thought, one moment where you choose not to follow the old fear story. That's the pivot point. That's where freedom begins. So the next time you wake up with anxiety gripping your chest, remember, it's not a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that your brain is running a program it thinks will protect you. But you don't have to keep running that program. You can speak to it. You can rewire it. You can tell yourself a different story. And when you do that enough times, eventually that becomes your new truth. So, here's something most people don't realize when they're stuck in a cycle of anxiety. Your body is trying to help you. It's not betraying you. It's not broken. It's responding exactly how it was wired to respond when it feels threatened. But the problem is, your body doesn't always know the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. And when anxiety becomes chronic, when it becomes a daily experience, what's really happening is that your nervous system has gotten stuck in a survival loop and it keeps pulling the alarm even when there's no actual fire. This is why regulating your nervous system is one of the most powerful things you can do to interrupt anxiety at the root. Because you can't think your way out of an anxious body. You can't logic your way out of fight or flight. Your brain might understand that there's nothing to be afraid of, but your body is still reacting like danger is around the corner. That's where the disconnect happens. That's why so many people feel like they're doing all the right things, positive affirmations, mental reframes, meditation, but they still wake up tense. Still feel like their heart is racing for no reason, still get flooded with worry before they even check their phone. So if you want to truly reset, you have to bring your body into the healing process because your nervous system holds on to every unprocessed emotion, every unresolved moment, every time you swallowed your truth or ignored your boundaries or held it together when you were falling apart inside. That doesn't just disappear, it gets stored. And eventually it shows up as anxiety, as tension, as restlessness, as a nervous system that's constantly scanning for threats, even in safe environments. But the beautiful part is your body also knows how to heal. It knows how to come back into balance. It knows how to return to safety when you give it the tools to do so. This is where nervous system regulation comes in, and no, it doesn't require an hour of yoga or a silent retreat. Sometimes the most transformative practices are the simplest. Take something like deep breathing, not the kind you do once and forget. I'm talking about intentional, rhythmic, grounded breathing that signals to your body you are safe right now. When you inhale slowly through your nose, hold for a moment, and exhale longer than you inhale, you're actually activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you designed for rest, healing, and calm. And when that kicks in, anxiety starts to release its grip. Or maybe it's movement, walking in the morning, stretching, shaking out your limbs. These may seem small, but to your body, they're cues. They tell your nervous system, hey, we're not frozen anymore. We're not in danger. We're moving forward. Even placing your hand on your heart and saying, I'm okay right now, is powerful because what your nervous system craves more than anything is safety. It just wants to know you're listening. And sometimes the way we listen to our bodies is through stillness, through slowing down enough to feel what's actually there. Because here's the truth most people avoid. Anxiety often has a message. It's trying to get your attention, not to punish you, but to protect you, to tell you that you've been pushing too hard, that you haven't rested, that you're overwhelmed or disconnected or ignoring something that matters. And when you ignore those signals long enough, the body speaks louder. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You were not designed to live in survival mode. You were not built to be stuck in a state of constant hypervigilance, always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. But if that's been your experience for a long time, your nervous system might not know what safety feels like, so you have to reintroduce it gently, moment by moment, through practices that say it's okay to soften, it's okay to release, it's okay to feel safe again. And no, it doesn't happen overnight. Regulation isn't a switch. It's a relationship. It's a commitment to checking in with your body, to pausing before you power through, to noticing the signs of tension and responding with compassion instead of judgment. It's less about fixing your anxiety and more about creating an environment inside you where anxiety doesn't have to take over. You begin to build that environment through rituals, through small, consistent actions that say, I'm on my side now. And when you make that your foundation, something profound starts to shift. Your mornings stop feeling like battles. Your body stops feeling like the enemy. You stop bracing for life and start meeting it with presence. Because healing isn't just about what you know, it's about what you embody. It's about the signals you send to your nervous system on a daily basis. And when those signals are grounded in safety, in awareness, in intentional care, your entire internal world begins to change. So the next time you feel anxiety rising, pause. Not to suppress it, but to listen. Ask your body what it needs in that moment. Breathe with it. Move with it. Remind it, we're not in danger anymore. And slowly, gently, you begin to rewrite the story. And now we get to the part most people avoid talking about. The way we talk to ourselves when we're anxious. That quiet, relentless inner dialogue. That voice in your head that doesn't just narrate your experience, but distorts it, shames it, spins it into something heavier than it really is. And it's subtle. You don't always notice it because you've been living with it for so long. It starts to sound like truth, but it's not truth. It's conditioning. And if you don't learn to interrupt that narrative, it will control you. Here's the thing. Your inner dialogue isn't just background noise. It's a system. A deeply ingrained pattern that your brain runs on autopilot. And when your default setting is anxiety, that system gets hijacked. Every thought becomes a potential problem. Every feeling becomes a crisis. Every silence becomes something to fill with worry. And without realizing it, you begin to anticipate worst-case scenarios, not because they're likely, but because your brain has become addicted to preparing for pain. This is where anxiety gets its power, not just from how you feel, but from what you tell yourself about those feelings. I can't handle this, something's wrong with me, what if I mess this up? That self-talk loops over and over until you're not even reacting to the situation, you're reacting to the story you've told yourself about it. You've created a version of reality where fear always wins, where failure is around every corner, and where peace feels like a distant fantasy instead of a reachable state. But here's what I want you to understand. Your thoughts are not facts. That voice in your head, the one constantly pointing out what's wrong, what could go wrong, or what might not be enough, that voice isn't you. It's a survival script, a collection of experiences, beliefs, and fears that your brain has bundled together to keep you safe. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's accurate. And just because it's loud doesn't mean it deserves the final say. You have to challenge it. Not with toxic positivity, not by forcing fake affirmations that you don't believe, but with awareness, with presence, with truth. You start by catching it in the act. Notice when the thought spirals begin, when the self-doubt creeps in, when you hear that inner voice tearing you down instead of building you up, and instead of running with it, you pause. You ask, is this voice trying to protect me? Or is it just repeating an old fear? Is this thought grounded in reality, or is it just a reflex? The more you do that, the more you create distance between who you are and what you're thinking. You stop identifying with the anxiety and start witnessing it. You stop being consumed by the voice and start observing it. And in that space, in that tiny moment of separation, everything begins to shift. Because once you've observed the thought, you have a choice. You can keep feeding it or you can reframe it. You can say, no, I'm not broken. I'm learning how to self-regulate. Or, no, I'm not weak for feeling this. I'm strong for facing it. Or even, okay, this feels intense right now, but I've been through worse. I'm not going to run. I'm going to breathe through this. That's not denial. That's self-leadership. That's emotional maturity. That's what it means to rewire the mental patterns that fuel your anxiety. And this work is ongoing because the voice will return. The story will try to play itself out again. That's what the mind does. It looks for what's familiar, even if that familiarity is pain. But the more you stay conscious, the more you reclaim the narrative. You become the one directing the script instead of the actor being dragged through a scene you didn't choose. Eventually, you start to build a new internal culture, one rooted in safety, in kindness, in resilience, where thoughts are allowed, but they're not always believed, where feelings are honored, but they don't dictate your entire day, where your default isn't panic, but pause, where you meet yourself in the middle of a spiral and say, this isn't who I am. This is just something I'm experiencing, and I have the tools to handle it. And here's the most powerful part. When you shift that inner dialogue, your external world starts to follow because you're no longer reacting to life from a place of fear. You're responding from a place of alignment. You're not just surviving, you're navigating, making conscious choices instead of unconscious assumptions, creating new evidence for your brain to work with. You're showing your mind a new possibility that you are not fragile. You are not lost. You are not doomed to live in fear. You are evolving. And every time you choose truth over the old story, you take your power back. And that's how real transformation happens. Not in the absence of anxiety, but in the presence of a new response. There's a moment, maybe it's first thing in the morning or right before you fall asleep, where your mind feels like a battlefield. You know the feeling, that subtle tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the knot in your stomach that shows up before you even know what you're anxious about. And even if nothing is technically wrong, your body and mind are already bracing for impact. This is what it feels like when your nervous system is stuck in survival mode. And for a lot of people, this state isn't occasional, it's their default. The real tragedy here is that we've normalized it. We say things like, I'm just an anxious person, or that's just how I'm wired, as if it's fixed, as if living in a constant state of alertness and overwhelm is part of who we are. But it's not. It's a pattern, one you likely didn't choose, but one that you can absolutely unlearn. And it begins with understanding how the nervous system works, and more importantly, how to soothe it. See, your nervous system was designed to keep you alive, not to keep you calm. Its job is to scan for danger, to react quickly, to activate you in the face of perceived threats. That's where anxiety comes in. It's not just in your head, it's in your body. It's your system saying, hey, we don't feel safe. And whether that threat is real or imagined doesn't matter. Your body doesn't know the difference between a text that triggers you and a tiger in the wild. If it feels unsafe, it sounds the alarm. So when you're constantly anxious, it's not just a mental issue, it's physiological. Your heart rate increases, your breath shortens, your muscles tense, your digestive system slows down. Your brain even shifts into a more reactive state. And when that becomes your norm, your entire life starts to be filtered through the lens of fear and urgency. You overthink, you overanalyze, you shut down or lash out. You constantly look for something to control because deep down, everything feels out of control. But here's the truth. Just like the brain can be rewired, the nervous system can be reconditioned. You are not locked into a lifetime of reacting the same way. You can teach your body to feel safe again. And when your body feels safe, your mind follows. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the most powerful tools are often the simplest. Breath is one of them. Intentional breathing, slow, deep, conscious inhales, and even slower exhales literally signals to your nervous system that it can stand down. It's not just a calming technique, it's a biological message. We're okay now. Another tool is movement. When your body is frozen in a stress response, physical movement helps release that trapped energy. A short walk, stretching, shaking out your arms, dancing in your room. Anything that tells your body it doesn't have to stay in freeze or fight mode. You're not escaping, you're completing the stress cycle that anxiety interrupted. Then there's grounding, the act of bringing yourself into the now. Not the disaster your brain is imagining, not the mistakes of the past, but this moment. Your feet on the floor, the air against your skin, the sound of your breath. When you bring your awareness back to the present, you take away the fuel that anxiety feeds on, fear of what might happen. And the more you practice this, the stronger your emotional baseline becomes. You're not jumping at every thought, every emotion, every trigger. You're observing it all from a place of grounded presence. And maybe the most underrated skill of all, self-regulation. That ability to feel your feelings fully without being hijacked by them. To notice the rising panic and say, okay, I see you, I'm still here. Let's breathe through this. Not pushing it away, not pretending it's not there, but also not letting it take the wheel. That's how power is reclaimed. Not by avoiding discomfort, but by learning how to hold it. And look, none of this is about becoming some emotionless robot who never gets anxious. That's not the goal. The goal is resilience. The goal is to be able to meet life, its uncertainty, its chaos, its curveballs, with a nervous system that doesn't immediately collapse under pressure, with a mind that doesn't jump to panic but pauses long enough to ask, what's actually true here? When you learn to regulate your nervous system, everything changes: your relationships, your decisions, your ability to stay present. You stop chasing control because you finally feel like you are in control of your reactions, your energy, your choices. You stop feeling like a prisoner of your own body and start building a relationship with it rooted in trust. And that's when anxiety loses its grip, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Because the storm might still come, but now you've built a home inside yourself that it can't tear down.